Chapter 5 of The Hunger Games opens with Katniss with the stylist as she's preparing for the tributes parade. It's here in this chapter that we're introduced to, for the first time, people from the capital other than Effie, so we can understand whether or not Effie is just like that as a person, or whether she is actually a product of the capital. And we do learn that Effie is very much a product of her upbringing and the environment that she was raised in, because the stylists that we do meet very much reflect that artificial nature within her. I stand there completely naked as the three circle me, wielding tweezers to remove any last bits of hair. I know I should be embarrassed, but they're so unlike people that I'm no more self-conscious than if a trio of oddly coloured birds were pecking around my feet. The irony in this statement. The Hunger Games in themselves are a contradiction, showing that humanity at its very base level is savage. Humans are inherently barbaric. And the capital citizens watch the Hunger Games every year, and they comment on how barbaric and savage everyone from the districts are, insinuating that they are somehow less than human. And what they mean is that it is humanity uncivilized. This can be shown with how Effie described the previous District 12 tributes when they had no table manners. But here we have Katniss, someone from those very savage districts, viewing the capital citizens as something inhuman. What is less human? To be torn down to such base instincts that you become savage and murderous, or to be made up with so many fake enhancements that the majority of the original you is gone? The three step back and admire their work. "Excellent! You almost look like a human being now," says Flavius, and they all laugh. Can anything really truly be defined as inherently human when we live such vastly different experiences? Or is there innate savagery in the capital citizens and innate vanity in the district citizens alike? It's hard to hate my prep team. They're such total idiots. And yet, in an odd way, I know they're sincerely trying to help me. Here is the first true sign we get of Katniss's later steadfast conviction to help everyone, even those in the capital. She can never ever blame someone for ignorance, even if it unintentionally causes malice. When we compare Katniss and Gale as characters and wonder what it would be like if he went into the games instead, it's hard to tell whether or not he would have had the same reaction to the stylist as Katniss did, because we know for certain that when Katniss comes home, Gale definitely feels negatively always to the capital citizens. Another major theme that we're starting to notice throughout this book is the theme of food. Both the aspect of it being available in excess and the lack of it through starvation. The overindulged versus the underfed. The top splits and from below rises a second tabletop that holds our lunch. Chicken in chunks of oranges cooked in a creamy sauce laid on a bed of pearly white grain, tiny green peas and onions, rolls shaped like flowers, and for dessert, a pudding the colour of honey. Katniss will often over-describe food, and then immediately after, she'll obsess about how she would have made it back home in District 12. She has been the main, or rather sole provider of sustenance to her family for years. She is food obsessed because it is literally the thing that consumes her every waking worry. Will they be able to eat the next day? Will they be able to eat the next meal? What must it be like, I wonder, to live in a world where food appears at the press of a button? How would I spend the hours I now commit to combing through the woods for sustenance if it was so easy to come by? What do they do all day, these people in the capital, besides decorating their bodies and waiting for a few new shipments of tributes to roll in and die for their entertainment? Katniss simply does not know what she would be doing if she wasn't figuring out what her and her family were going to eat. The level of poverty that Katniss and her family lives in is so extreme that she is currently on the base level, on the lowest level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's no luxury, there's no treats, there's nothing more than basic survival. Another character we're introduced to here is Cinna. "I asked for District 12, he says without further explanation. Without us knowing why Cinna asked for District 12, this in itself is such a powerful statement. Because District 12 is never chosen, never wanted. It's always forgotten and left to the dregs. But someone chose this district. Someone wanted them, wanted Katniss. See, Portia and I think that coal miner thing's very overdone. No one will remember you in that. And we both see it as our job to make the District 12 tributes unforgettable," says Cinna. Making a statement. Cinna wanted to help the most disenfranchised districts by giving them a voice and giving them power through art. The use of propaganda as a weapon in war is a major theme throughout the entire series, and it's with Cinna here that we see it created from its inception. We've seen how the capital uses propaganda to essentially brainwash and indoctrinate the districts and the capital citizens, but now we finally get a look at how the rebels will eventually use propaganda to their advantage. I want the audience to recognize you when you're in the arena, says Cinna dreamily. Katniss, the girl who was on fire. There's power in Cinna taking a district that is usually dressed up in soot, in ash, in what many of the districts would view as dirt, and turning it into something deadly, something hypnotizing, something that you can't help but not look away from, because fire is in itself life. It feeds off the very oxygen that we feed off of. And as Katniss later says, it works to literally outshine the other tributes. It burns brighter and it burns hotter, and it will make a statement. And then we get to the tributes parade, the first true spectacle within the games. I think he wants for us to hold hands, says Peter. He grabs my right hand in his left and we look at Cinna for confirmation. He nods and gives a thumbs up, and that's the last thing we see before we enter the city. Cinna not only gave power back to District 12 by presenting it as something formidable and dangerous, but also gave power to Katniss and Peter by presenting them as a united front. Rather than adversaries, they are allies, bonded together. This idea makes for great entertainment during the games, despite being the very antithesis of what the games stand for. As I gain confidence, I actually blow a few kisses to the crowd. The people of the capital are going nuts, showering us with flowers, shouting our names, our first names, which they have bothered to find on the program. No one will forget me. Not my look, not my name. Katniss, the girl who was on fire. For the first time, I feel a flicker of hope rising in me. Surely there must be one sponsor willing to take me on, and with a little extra help, some food, the right weapon, why should I count myself out of the games? The fire itself not only gave power to District 12, but also to Katniss and Peter as people. How many years have the District 12 tributes ridden in the tributes parade to be ignored? How many children have gone through the games with no one but their families knowing their names? Fire imbues life, and it literally gave life to the idea that Katniss and Peter could have a chance, could be heard, could be remembered. But this also shows that even Katniss is susceptible to the allure of spectacle, of grandeur, of being so adored and revered that you almost forget where you're headed for a moment. I can't help feeling strange about the way Cinna has linked us together. It's not really fair to present us as a team and then lock us in the arena to kill each other. And that is the point. It's never explicitly stated in the novels, but it is heavily implied that Cinna was at least somewhat involved with the rebellion movement. Him presenting Katniss and Peter as a united front is a direct statement against the game. He's planting the seed that the rebellion later feeds on, and he plants it so strategically and so easily that it almost feels purposeful. And this image alone of Katniss and Peter holding hands is enhanced tenfold in Catching Fire when all the tributes line up during the interviews and hold hands in protest of the Quarterquell. And then we get to the 5th Delort illustration. Not that I'm picking favorites, but if I had to pick favorites so far, this would be my favorite. We have Katniss and Peter in their costumes of fire riding into the tributes parade. Some things to note about the illustration already is that we have a Roman-style chariot guiding them in. Suzanne Collins was incredibly inspired by Romans and Roman culture and the idea of gladiators in an arena when she was writing these books. Even names like Coriolanus and Seneca Crane are that of Roman origin. Then you have the capital people in the grandstands, and what I really like about this in itself is that the further away the capital people get, the more they resemble the idea of just sparkles. As if the less you can see the true humanity of them, the more they fade into just enhancements and grandeur and smoke and mirrors. The people in the capital may see the people in the districts as nothing but dirt, but the people in the districts are often inclined to see the capital citizens as nothing but glitter. We have a man standing guard at the entrance to the tunnel, and I'm inclined to believe that this is Cinna more so than a random guard, purely because of the way that he holds the fire torch as if he has just lit Katniss and Peter and sent them on their way. I also like to believe that it is Cinna because it almost gives the impression that this person is watching over them, watching over this art that he has created and waiting to see the impact of it in real time. It's also nice to see the contrast between the small blaze that Cinna holds compared to the very inferno that engulfs Katniss and and Peter, in itself very much showing that a tiny spark alone can ignite an insanely massive inferno. The composition of this illustration is also very clever and very telling, because we have Katniss and Peter as seemingly the focus of the image, but what is actually centralized in this illustration is the fire itself. Again, insinuating, much like when Madge was putting the Mockingjay pin on Katniss in that illustration, that the symbol itself and the statement itself is more important than the people. We also have Katniss and Peter with their hands tightly together up on the chariot, and I really appreciate that Delort had their hands up so we can see them, because I worry we wouldn't be able to see them behind the chariot when it is such an essential part of this scene. And then we have Katniss and Peter themselves riding in, Inferno behind them, small blazes creating a crown on their heads, looking incredibly regal and incredibly together. With the way their hands are held between each other and their opposite hands wave, they are so symmetrical without even really trying. They also look out in opposite directions, either mesmerized by the crowd or actively trying to play to the crowd, or it could be both. The final thing I want to point out is the background of this illustration. These bulbous puffs that could be clouds, but I believe are actually meant to be smoke. It's unclear whether the Capitol had actual fires going on during the tributes parade beyond the actual staging for it, but since it doesn't say, we can understand that Delort did this as a very pointed addition. Katniss and Peter have just entered the arena, and they are leaving a trail of smoke with them, but since they've just entered, they wouldn't have left that much, and it wouldn't be rising up from beyond where the staging is. There's that very common phrase where there's smoke, there's fire. And it's interesting that since this image is so focused on the statement of fire being linked to the later rebellion, we can understand that maybe this smoke and this ash is meant to insinuate that there already is a fire building. Without any of us currently knowing, there is already a rebellion building beyond the walls of the spectacle of the games, and there is very little that they can do to stop it. But now someone has infiltrated the games. The final thing I want to talk about in this chapter is the relationship between Katniss and Peter. "What do you think?" I whisper to Peter, "about the fire?" "I'll rip off your cape if you rip off mine," he says through gritted teeth. "Deal," I say. Despite Katniss's revelation at the end of chapter 4 about Peter's character, even she admits that she is relieved to see him when he enters for the tributes parade. And despite her adamance to steer clear of him at any given point, she falls into an easy banter with him, each of them tossing out a joke. "Where is Haymitch anyway? Isn't he supposed to protect us from this sort of thing?" says Peter. "With all that alcohol in him, it's probably not advisable to have him around an open flame," I say. And suddenly we're both laughing. Katniss claims that the reason for the laughing and the banter with Peter in this moment is due to nerves, and this very much could be true. But it is worth pointing out that of all the people that Katniss has interacted with, Peter is the only one that she has truly laughed with, despite nearly every single situation she's been in so far being a stressful one. Despite her clear reluctance, she finds herself immediately comforted by him, letting her guard down in a way that is very different to the way that she does with Gale. I'm glad now I have Peter to clutch for balance. He is so steady, solid as a rock. Maybe Cinna knew that they would need each other to balance on. Maybe Katniss needed just anyone to hold on to get through this. Maybe Peter already acts as a pillar of grounding for Katniss. I realize I must have completely stopped the circulation in Peter's hand. That's how tightly I've been holding it. I look down at our linked fingers and I loosen my grasp, but he regains his grip on me. "No, don't let go of me," he says. The firelight flickers off his blue eyes. "Please, I might fall out of this thing." Katniss also grounds Peter. Both of them are gripping each other so tightly that without them they worry they won't be able to stand up properly. "You should wear flames more often," he says. "They suit you." And then he gives me a smile that seems so genuinely sweet, with just the right touch of shyness that unexpected warmth rushes through me. A warning bell goes off in my head. Don't be stupid. Peter is planning how to kill you, I remind myself. The way that Katniss says just the right touch of shyness insinuates that Peter was concocting his smile the way that one would a recipe, like it was something very carefully thought out rather than a natural emotion appearing on his face. Now that Katniss has decided and affirmed that Peter is playing a game, everything he does is strategic to her. But because two can play at this game, I stand on tiptoe and kiss his cheek. right on his bruise. Ignoring what might be going on in Peter's poor head, let's think about what Katniss meant with this. The gesture of a kiss on the cheek, something so delicate, coupled with the bruise, something so violent, gives the impression that Katniss is both comforting Peter and also reminding him of his very real pain. Which could be how Katniss feels around Peter herself, comforted by his seemingly kind presence, but also very much reminded of the worst time in her life and how she owes her survival, at least partially, to him. She could also just be playing up the friendly act herself, flirting back with Peter when he flirts with her. She's not yet sure of his angle, we know this, but she also does not want to be left behind, which is unfortunately a losing battle, because as we find out over and over and over again, Katniss Everdeen is the last person to find anything out. And that concludes chapter 5. See you for chapter 6!